Commander Jiho Kim pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window, watching the massive alien ships drift silently through space. Their hulls gleamed like polished silver, each vessel larger than Earth's biggest cities. For 3 long years, these ships had surrounded human space like prison guards, making sure humanity stayed locked away from the rest of the galaxy. "Another message from the Confederation Council," said Lieutenant Nara Choi, walking up behind him with a datapad in her hands. Her voice sounded tired, the same exhaustion that had settled over every human who dealt with alien politics. "They rejected our trade proposal again." Jiho turned away from the window and took the pad. The message was short and cold, written in the universal language that all spacefaring species used. The Zephyrian Trade Council had refused humanity's request to buy basic medical supplies. Their reason was always the same: humans were too dangerous and unpredictable to be trusted. "What did we do wrong this time?" asked Dr. Minho Park, looking up from his research station. His desk was covered with alien artifacts that human ships had found floating in space, pieces of technology that the advanced species had thrown away like garbage. Minho spent his days trying to understand how they worked, because the aliens refused to teach humans anything. "Same as always," Jiho replied, tossing the datapad onto a nearby table. "We exist." The story had started 3 years ago, when human scientists finally figured out how to travel faster than light. It was not elegant technology like the aliens used. Human ships jumped through space with loud explosions and bright flashes, leaving trails of energy that could be seen from far away. When the first human ship stumbled into Confederation space, the aliens were not pleased. The Galactic Confederation was old, older than human civilization by thousands of years. 5 great species ruled over hundreds of smaller ones, maintaining perfect order across the galaxy. The Zephyrians could speak directly into each other's minds, sharing thoughts instantly across vast distances. The Karathi built machines so perfect they never broke down or made mistakes. The Breakdal were warriors with strength that could crush steel with their bare hands. The Valinari could control pure energy, shaping it like clay in an artist's hands. The Nexari thought as one mind, billions of individuals connected in perfect harmony. Then came humanity, stumbling through space with their crude ships and chaotic minds. Humans had no telepathy, no perfect technology, no collective consciousness. They were loud, unpredictable, and worst of all, they survived things that should have killed them. When a human ship got damaged, the crew would fix it with spare parts and determination. When humans faced impossible odds, they would find ways to win anyway. The Confederation studied humanity for 6 months before making their decision. The report was clear. Humans were a primitive disruption species that would upset the careful balance of galactic civilization. They were too emotional, too creative, too willing to break rules when those rules did not make sense. So the quarantine began. Massive fleets surrounded human space, preventing any human ship from leaving their small corner of the galaxy. Trade was allowed, no cultural exchange, no technology sharing. Humanity was alone. "Look at this," said Nara, pointing to her communication screen. "I am picking up distress signals from the outer rim. Confederation ships are asking for emergency assistance." Jiho walked over to look. The signals were faint but clear. Several alien vessels were in trouble near the edge of known space, their engines failing and life support systems breaking down. Standard Confederation protocol would be to send rescue ships immediately. "Should we respond?" asked Minho. "They never help us." Jiho stared at the screen for a long moment. The smart thing would be to ignore the signals. The aliens had made it clear that humans were not welcome in their perfect society. They had isolated humanity like a disease, treating them as if they were dangerous animals that needed to be kept in cages. But that was not how humans worked. Even when people treated them badly, humans had a strange habit of helping anyway. It was probably one of the things that made the aliens nervous about them. "Prepare a rescue ship," Jiho ordered. "Full medical supplies and repair equipment." "Sir," said Nara, looking confused, "the Confederation Council specifically forbids any contact between human and alien vessels." "Then they should have thought of that before flying into trouble near our space," Jiho replied. "We are not going to let people die just because their governments do not like us." As the human rescue ship launched toward the distress signals, none of them knew that their decision would change everything. Far away, in the darkness between galaxies, something ancient and hungry was stirring. Something that would make the Confederation's perfect order seem as fragile as glass dots soon. The aliens would discover that their unwanted neighbors possessed something more valuable than perfect technology or telepathic minds. Humans had the stubborn refusal to give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. In the coming darkness, that would make all the difference. Xiaomin Li was drinking her third cup of coffee when the stars started going out. She worked the night shift at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station, a job that was usually boring. Most nights, she watched the same patterns of light from distant suns, checked for broken satellites, and counted the hours until morning. But tonight was different. On her screen, entire star systems were disappearing one by one, like someone was turning off lights across the galaxy. "Director Dayun Zhang," she called across the quiet control room. "You need to see this, right now." Dayun walked over, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The monitoring station was small, with only 5 people working at night. Most of the equipment was old, built from spare parts and human determination, rather than the perfect technology the aliens used. "What am I looking at?" he asked, staring at Xiaomin's screen. 23 star systems have gone dark in the past 4 hours, she said, pointing to the expanding zones of blackness on the star map. "No signals, no light, nothing. It is like they just stopped existing." Dayon felt his stomach twist with worry. In all his years of watching space, he had never seen anything like this. Star systems did not just disappear. The first real information came 3 days later, from a badly damaged Confederation scout ship that limped into human space. The pilot was a Karathi engineer named Tekfar, his perfect metal body now covered in strange crystal growths that pulsed with dark energy. "They came from nowhere," he whispered in broken universal language. "Ships like living crystals, bigger than our greatest battleships. They do not conquer planets, they eat them." Dr. Minho Park examined the crystal growths, while Tekfar told his story. The aliens called them devourers, and they moved through space like a plague. They would surround a star system with their crystal ships, then send down beams of energy that changed everything they touched. Planets became crystal formations. Living beings were transformed into more devourers. Even space itself seemed to bend around them. "How did they defeat the Confederation fleets?" asked Jiho Kim, who had come to the monitoring station as soon as news of the crisis reached military command. "They adapt," Tekvar replied, his mechanical voice filled with something that sounded like fear. "Our perfect weapons worked for a few minutes, then the Devourers learned how to stop them. The telepaths tried to coordinate our defense, but the Devourers' minds were alien, impossible to understand. They drove many telepaths insane just by thinking near them." The reports that followed painted a picture of complete disaster. The Confederation's perfect order was crumbling like a house made of paper. The Karathi's machines, designed to work flawlessly for thousands of years, suddenly started breaking down when the Devourers looked at them. The Breakdo warriors, whose strength had never failed them, found that their enemies could not be crushed or broken. The Valenari discovered that the Devourers could turn their own energy attacks back at them. The Nexaries' shared consciousness became a weakness when the alien thoughts began infecting their hive mind. Captain Hyun Woo was patrolling the edge of human space when the first refugee ships appeared. His patrol ship, the Steadfast, was small and old compared to Confederation vessels. but it was his, and his crew knew how to make it work. "Captain," said his communications officer Yuna-O, "I am detecting multiple ships approaching our border. They look like Confederation civilians." Heian looked at his screen and saw them, hundreds of ships of different sizes and shapes, all fleeing from the expanding darkness. Some were damaged, trailing atmosphere and debris. Others were so overloaded with refugees that their engines could barely push them forward. "Sir," said Yuna, checking her instruments, "the automated defense systems are refusing to let them through. Confederation law still prohibits contact with human space." Heian watched the refugee ships drift helplessly at the border. Inside those vessels were families, children, survivors of worlds that no longer existed. The same aliens who had locked humanity away from the galaxy were now begging to be let into human space. The smart military decision would be to follow the law. The Confederation had made it clear that humans were not welcome in their society. Now that they were in trouble, why should humanity risk everything to help them? But Heian thought about his own family back on Earth. His daughter was only 8 years old. If Earth was under attack and they needed to flee, he would want someone to help them, even if their governments were enemies. "Override the defense systems," he ordered. "Let them through." Sir Yuna said carefully, "This could be seen as an act of war." "The war already started," Heian replied, watching the first refugee ships cross into human territory. "We just did not know we were fighting in it yet." As the alien refugees entered human space, they brought terrible news. The Devourers were not just destroying the outer colonies, they were moving toward the galaxy's center, toward the heart of Confederation power. And worst of all, they were learning from every battle, becoming stronger and more dangerous with each victory. The perfect galactic order was ending, and humanity found itself standing at the edge of darkness, welcoming the very people who had rejected them. Taeyong Lim stared at the piece of alien crystal on his workbench, its dark surface pulsing with strange energy patterns. The fragment had been cut from a destroyed Devourer ship, and it was unlike anything humans had ever seen before. Most scientists would have spent months studying it carefully, running tests and making detailed observations. Instead, Taeyong picked up a plasma torch and started cutting into it. "That is not how you analyze xenotechnology," said Veltar, the Karathi engineer working at the next table. His metallic voice carried the tone of someone who had spent centuries perfecting the art of scientific research. "You must first map its quantum structure, then analyze its energy patterns, then create mathematical models. Maybe that is why you lost to these things," replied Taeyong, not looking up from his work. Sparks flew as his torch bit into the crystal, and strange lights began dancing inside the alien material. The converted mining station on asteroid Juno 7 had become humanity's main research facility for captured Devourer technology. It was not pretty or sophisticated like the Confederation's research centers. The hallways were rough rock. The equipment was a mixture of human and salvaged alien parts, and everything smelled like machine oil and determination. But it was here that humans began to understand something the advanced aliens had missed. The Devourers were not just powerful, they were predictable. "Junho, hand me that multispanner," called Taeyong to his assistant. Junho-nam looked nervous as he passed over the tool. Working with active Devourer technology was dangerous. The crystals could explode, leak toxic energy, or worse, start growing and trying to convert everything around them into more Devourers. "Are you sure this is safe?" asked Junho, stepping back as the crystal fragment began to glow brighter. "Probably not," said Taeyong cheerfully, using the multispanner to pry open a section of the crystal. "But safe never got us anywhere." This was the difference between humans and the other species. When the Confederation encountered something dangerous, they studied it carefully and developed perfect solutions. When humans encountered something dangerous, they poked it with a stick to see what would happen. In the command center, Yoonji was watching combat recordings from the latest Devourer attacks. As the base's tactical officer, Her job was to find ways to fight the enemy. What she saw made her both worried and excited. The Devourers were incredibly adaptive. When the Karathi used plasma cannons, the aliens developed shields that absorbed plasma energy. When the Breakdal used kinetic weapons, the Devourers created armor that turned kinetic energy into power for their own systems. When the Zephyrians tried telepathic attacks, the alien minds learned to block mental intrusion. But there was a pattern. The Devourers adapted to each attack by creating a perfect counter-defense. They were like the ultimate students, learning every lesson and never making the same mistake twice. What if we do not want to be perfect? Yunji asked herself, staring at the screen. She called up the files from human military history. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years, and they had learned something important. The most effective tactics were often the most unpredictable ones. Guerrilla warfare, surprise attacks, weapons that worked differently every time they were used. Tae-young, she called across the research bay. Can you build me a weapon that works differently every time I fire it? That sounds like a terrible idea, replied Veltar, before Tae-young could answer. Weapons must be precise, reliable, predictable. Exactly, said Yanji with a smile. The Devourers expect precision. What happens when we give them chaos instead? 3 weeks later, Commander Wonho Kim led the first test mission against a small Devourer outpost near the Rigel system. His ship, the Defiant, was equipped with the strangest collection of weapons anyone had ever seen. There were missiles that changed their explosive power randomly, energy beams that shifted frequency while firing, and kinetic projectiles that split into unpredictable patterns. This is insane, muttered his weapons officer, Corporal Yumi Park, as she prepared to fire the new chaos cannons. Half of these weapons might not work at all, and the other half might work better than anything we have ever built, replied Wonho. Fire when ready. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Devourer ships tried to adapt to the human weapons, but every time they developed a defense, the weapons changed. The chaos cannons fired different types of energy with each shot. The random missiles exploded with different effects. Even the humans were not sure what their weapons would do next. The Devourers, for the first time since they had entered the galaxy, seemed confused. Their perfect adaptation systems could not handle weapons that refused to be consistent. They tried to learn from each attack, but there was nothing consistent to learn. Target destroyed, reported Yumi, staring at her instruments in amazement. The outpost is completely gone. Word of the victory spread quickly through the refugee networks. The humans had found a way to fight back, not through superior technology or perfect tactics, but through controlled chaos and creative unpredictability. For the first time in months, the galaxy had hope, and the research station on Juno 7 looked at his latest creation, a device that changed its function every few seconds. Sometimes a weapon, sometimes a shield, sometimes something entirely different. It is beautiful, he said proudly. Veltar stared at the chaotic machine in horror. It violates every principle of good engineering. Good, replied Tae-young. That is exactly the point. Admiral Seojin Park had never imagined he would be giving orders to a Breakdale warrior who stood 3 meters tall and could crush steel with his bare hands. But here he was, in the Joint Command Center on Luna Station, watching as species that had been enemies just months ago worked side by side to plan the largest military operation in galactic history. Jiang, what is the status on those hybrid weapon systems? He asked his aide, Lieutenant Jiang Han, who was coordinating with alien engineers across the command center. The Karathi have finished integrating our chaos field generators with their targeting computers, she reported, reading from her datapad. It is not pretty to look at, but the test results show it is 3 times more effective against Devourer shields than anything we had before. Seojin nodded and walked over to where Captain Doyoung Kwan was working with a mixed team of humans and aliens. Doyoung had the difficult job of translating human military tactics for species who had never encountered Earth's particular approach to warfare. "How are they adapting to our strategies?" Seojin asked. "Better than expected," replied Doyoung, gesturing to a group of Breakdal warriors who were studying human guerrilla tactics on a holographic display. "The Breakdal are fascinated by our hit-and-run methods. They have always fought with honor, in direct battle. But they are learning that sometimes the best way to win is to avoid fair fights entirely." Nearby, a Valinary energy shaper named Lumera was working with human engineer Corporal Hannah Kim to modify their energy manipulation techniques. The Valinary had always used their powers with precise control and mathematical perfection. Now, they were learning to embrace what humans called controlled chaos. "It feels wrong," admitted Lumera, her translucent form flickering with unstable energy patterns. "For centuries, we have sought perfect harmony in our energy work." "Perfect harmony is what the Devourers expect," replied Hannah, adjusting a device. That made Lumera's energy fields randomly shift patterns. "Sometimes being wrong is exactly right." The first joint operation was a rescue mission to the fallen Karathi homeworld of Mekta. The planet had been consumed by Devourers 3 weeks earlier, but long-range sensors showed that some survivors might still be hiding in the underground cities. Captain Hao Nyun led the rescue squadron from her modified fighter craft, the Phoenix. Behind her flew an unusual formation: human attack ships alongside Breakdal heavy fighters, Zephyrian scout vessels working in telepathic coordination with human pilots who could not read minds, and Valinary support craft that provided energy shields for the entire group. "This is Hound to all units," she broadcast as they approached the dead world. "Remember, we are not trying to defeat the Devourers here. We get in, grab the survivors, and get out before they can adapt to our tactics." The planet's surface was a nightmare of crystal formations where cities had once stood. Devourer ships moved between the spires like giant insects, harvesting the last traces of the world's converted matter. The rescue fleet stayed low, using the crystal formations as cover while they searched for signs of life. "I have something," reported Gina Park from her sensor station. "Underground complex, Sector 7. Life signs are faint but definitely there." The rescue operation required everything they had learned about working together. Human Marines used their chaos weapons to confuse the Devourer guards while Breakdal warriors provided heavy assault support. Zephyrian telepaths coordinated the complex operation while Valinary energy shapers created distractions to draw enemies away from the rescue site. But it was a moment of pure human stubbornness that saved the mission. When Devourer reinforcements surrounded the underground complex, cutting off the planned escape route, Sergeant Minsu Choi made a decision that would have horrified any military academy instructor. "All units, ignore the plan," he announced over the communication system. "We are making this up as we go." What followed was not a textbook military operation. It was chaos. Human units attacked from unexpected directions, while alien forces provided support in ways that had never been tried before. Breakdal warriors threw Valinary energy shapers through the air so they could reach better positions. Zephyrian telepaths coordinated with human pilots, who communicated by shouting over radio channels. The Devourers, expecting coordinated resistance, found themselves facing something they could not understand or adapt to. A battle plan that changed every few seconds based on whatever seemed like a good idea at the time. "Extraction complete," reported Hound, as the last transport lifted off from the planet's surface. All survivors recovered, minimal casualties. As news of the successful rescue spread across the refugee networks, something changed in the galaxy. For months, every report had been about defeat and loss. Now, species that had never worked together were proving they could fight back. Admiral Seojin received a message that surprised him more than any military victory. It was from the reformed Confederation Council, now calling itself the Galactic Alliance. They were offering humanity full membership and equal representation in the galactic government. 3 months ago, They would not even talk to us, commented Jiang, as she read the official invitation. 3 months ago, the galaxy was not ending, replied Xiajin. Desperate times make people reconsider their prejudices, but the real test was still coming. Intelligence reports showed that the Devourers were massing their forces near the galactic core, preparing for what looked like a final assault on the remaining free worlds. The alliance of former enemies would soon face their greatest challenge. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soo Lee stood on the bridge of the UES Unity, watching the largest armada in galactic history prepare for the final battle. Through the main view screen, he could see thousands of ships from dozens of different species, all united against the darkness that had consumed half the galaxy. The Unity itself was a symbol of how much had changed. Built in just 2 months using hybrid technology, the ship combined human engineering with alien science in ways that should have been impossible. Its hull was made from Karathi smart metal that could repair itself, powered by Valinary energy cores, and equipped with weapons that used human chaos field technology. Minji's status report on all assault teams. He called to his operations coordinator, Commander Minji Cha. All teams report ready for final approach, she replied, checking her displays. Captain Sungjae's Marines are linked with Breakdal shock troops for the boarding operations. Lieutenant Yejin's engineering teams have Karathi technical support for the sabotage mission. The Zephyrian telepaths are maintaining communication links with our tactical officers. The target was the Devourer breeding facility at the galactic core, a massive structure that had grown around an ancient black hole. Intelligence reports suggested that this was where the aliens created new Devourer ships and planned their expansion across the galaxy. If they could destroy it, they might stop the invasion entirely, but the facility was protected by the largest concentration of Devourer forces anyone had ever seen. Millions of crystal ships swarmed around the structure like angry insects, their adaptive technology ready to counter any conventional attack. Sir, reported Lieutenant Wujin Nam from the tactical station. Long-range sensors show the Devourers are already beginning to adapt their defenses. They must know we are coming. Kung Su smiled grimly. Good. Let them prepare for a normal attack. The battle began exactly as the Devourers expected. The Allied fleet approached in standard formation, with heavy battleships leading the assault, and smaller craft providing support. The alien defenders moved to intercept, their weapons charging in their shields, configured to stop the most likely attacks. Then the humans did what they did best. They threw out the rulebook. All ships, execute Plan Chaos, ordered Kung Su. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was controlled madness. Human ships broke formation and attacked from random directions. Breakdal warriors launched themselves from boarding pods while their ships were still moving. Valinary energy shapers created false targets that confused Devourer sensors. Zephyrian telepaths coordinated attacks that made no logical sense, but somehow worked perfectly, deep inside the breeding facility. Captain Sungjai Beek led a joint assault team through corridors that pulsed with organic light. The interior of the structure was like being inside a living creature, with walls that moved and floors that seemed to breathe. Stay close, he told his mixed team of human marines and alien warriors. The floor plans keep changing, but Lieutenant Yejin's engineering team says the power core should be 3 levels down. Behind them, Breakdal warrior Grokthal carried equipment that would have taken 3 humans to lift. Beside him, a Valinary named Silandra provided light and energy shields. They had trained together for only weeks, but they moved like a team that had worked together for years. Contact Front, called Corporal Dayun Song, raising her chaos rifle as Devourer defenders appeared in the corridor ahead. The battle was fierce but brief. Human unpredictability combined with alien strength and energy control overwhelmed the defenders before they could adapt. 3 levels down, Lieutenant Yejin Kim and her engineering team worked frantically to overload the facility's power systems. The Devourer technology was unlike anything in the known galaxy, but months of studying captured fragments had taught the humans how to disrupt it. The power couplings are quantum-locked, reported Karathi engineer Tekvar, who had become one of humanity's most valuable allies since his rescue. Standard overload procedures will not work. Then we do not use standard procedures, replied Jejin, pulling out what looked like a collection of spare parts held together with wire and determination. This is a human chaos field generator. It makes quantum locks forget what they are supposed to be locking. She activated the device, and the facility's power systems began to fluctuate wildly. Deep in the structure, breeding chambers started to shut down, and crystal formations began to crack. All teams, emergency evacuation, broadcast Kung Su from the Unity. The facility is going critical. The escape was as chaotic as the attack. Human ships swooped in to collect boarding teams, while Breakto fighters provided covering fire. Valent craft created energy tunnels to speed evacuation, and Zephyrian telepaths guided everyone through the confusion with mental coordination. Just as the last Allied ship cleared the area, the Devourer breeding facility collapsed into the black hole. At the galactic core, the implosion created a gravitational wave that destroyed every Devourer ship in the system and sent a message across the galaxy. The tide had turned. 6 months later, Ambassador Changmin Yu stood before the Galactic Alliance Council in the rebuilt chambers on the neutral world of Haven. Around him sat representatives from species that had once refused to acknowledge humanity's existence. We were outcasts because we did not fit your perfect system, he said, addressing the assembly. But when your perfect system failed, our imperfections became exactly what you needed to survive. Today, we stand not as conquerors or saviors, but as partners in building a galaxy where differences are strengths, not weaknesses. The vote was unanimous. The quarantine barriers came down forever, replaced by trade routes and cultural exchange programs. Across the galaxy, human colonies grew alongside alien settlements, and former refugees became permanent neighbors. The outcasts had found their place among the stars, not by becoming like everyone else, but by teaching the galaxy that being different was exactly what made them valuable.